on Facebook also. Molbe konto mo Dauda. And thank you for your time. Happy Sunday. Let me know if Jaliba is too loud. I find calls sometimes it helps when you're listening to people. Model Kelama because of the background music. That's the secret. Anyway, I'm all back on the Mobe Dauda. Mafla al Sama, Dola Altinia, because now time on Mankile. And happy Sunday. So first of all, Galong, I'm making a movie. 2026 is not a joke. So kodol bi yangal telephone ka mo le no kala nyaka si distraction wala attention you know la no si ba kodol bi yo nyaka so mandia. Because ne mo ye ma wa nyama. Afuta nyaw nyang. E ko sulo fenyo jam pata nyaw nyani ya anyu pada ka dimel. So wala be kere farma ja un pasise men ne mol malo me du nar la history kono le saje. Mol sa kala mo mo si fa le membe deal ka. Come to Wi-Fi is slow or something. Type in the comments if you guys are having any issues. Let me know if there's any slow connection. I can notify like a slow connection for some reason, and I can switch off from Wi-Fi. Just give me a thumbs up if you're hearing me okay, if everything looks okay from your end. Interruption of an ambiguity, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just continue. So first things first, ngalong post kala mo my America because I can't apologize tale. So then you kusiva kita molka kamfal. Because of that kamfa, ni fintan idea modoke. Akane mulungo jawiyandel. Yeah, just setan kolega. They bring out the worst in you. So na first reaction I was gonna go live to respond, but Nintendo no time maybe metinya rokela. So I was grateful. Omar Walia interview nyaming, and then I'll apologize. So basically that, in essence, it calmed me down. I said that more for myself, but more me along kwenye mankala sila followed, mankala sila flanyot, mankala sila sabanyot. I sit in nyina ma jigod. Niwo fintana ke koteke molia muda ka fukong apologize tala watat na kata kala koteka bakla koteka. So apology ni wo munyina to drong ka fani nyandi mol koto or something, I don't know. Memba ya besirin dan tam nindo ya kola no beka chala. The same thing she'll be saying it. Hoping that audio does not come out. So apology ni fine, is decent. Ni molia kuke manjana menkala molia for ko apologize about apology fana asatra koto le ba. Yo kuo menka manyinya ikana siaka ani tubo fon wala apology basically wala ka tube yo kuje oke ko nyi mambete yo tube ikana siaka kote na usaska wa example dina ko tu wa joko le fer kando ni dar yebulo la fer kando ka mo gafa ya bonni je kataba andu ni mo kaya seje kote ketaka. So wala apology te nyindo is not sincere, you know. Fatma de Jahumba Sise ya jame used to tell stories about her akala kumo fo moli nanu Jawara time you must state house didn't want for let the children friend lambang or something like that, but I've been in state house. Yeah, jama ka for no mole metinol to ka folkon ko mo sifal many along go benum PPP masakunda our time on little phone left and live as soldiers from state house era comboy because on ablanda farma jom pasi because on ablanda mo tokon e juduta like you know ya doya ya ka fire boy kanila. That lady was in state house Jawara time, close to that family. Kabriye Jawara kulita bataji ayal mata area Jamaica. The camera na man Jawara family long, camera na me long phone ko ani in the kusuro. Akite ya Jamaica jalot. Wana ya Jamaica na ma respect. I will bake ya Jamaica na faga kumba ka fa ngo hanatra mbindani ya men tala wala don tadro. almost civil many along go, they have no self-worth. Come in my fando fare. Ya jeme botaji. Mol yala audio mo jana kaya jeme do adaman. Kabri APRC Noto Alliance APRC fa bakari belo nyo sabola ya jeme be audio kila na wati wat. Ay muna fa ya jeme. Mo be ya moy. Kuni ka ngunu mamenkor. Bi murre ko na ikado ya. Waya jeme tamol kono len. Na balo campagne ni aja ka ko ha nyoma ham baro moma indi fi def ma diploma ni ko non aka titar wala wo rancam manya atala politiko rara be mu world no substance nothing kan you kuma jowo fu mole but this is a different generation ya mole ba sen lema noto ja bota dal you know so ate wala matala problem wol anin jawra nyol yaki janne ya fanka wol yow ñu ya compine ba katam balti anin you know ppp dawda bije je wol bondi jere don flipa yel mata ya jamata abu ko jawra fu mo to fu ko de ya jama ya do ay ko si va be kala hawna nya ba non kabri ya jama bari je saim barola ko kam maka ya jama na wa fla fololam to lele ma man fu abole ke gambaro nim baro pata je ni yi ma tay sami roka na man baro support because that's how they survive ite la balo be dande wol modu na balo be dande ndawento ni ko be je mala aka sila so silam wala be fe nyola ku ku tanyin ko ma na man ke wol bari ne moluma asatre de fana se ko ma jube kana lo kana ku so ko ma me alon ko mol sa fo no no ko na la history ana bara dame wol be je but ni aje kanyin sifal ke silam la be fe nyon e be silan ne because nit ñi boté la ñim place oldo e ba jube la le kunna next government kono nyaadi le mo sifal le benana ani be fam manipuler la nyaade fo du wala ina sakul kono pour que ñim benefit men so based on taxpayer mo le ke balunde sara dan la because if you live on taxpayer money, that's what it is. It is fansa manola, it is Julaya kenola, it is hanim binani ata kenol because he mando kuno. So high life may deltala. Nimbuke wasaka foko nga doku ke nga na bungo jo, nga balwo soto nga na dino la kara bungo jo, nunku ku soto da kola kanyandale no. Bumbal lebe lola, domor balye domo luolung, moto nyimali borendi. It left a fly la down it was high life cool what random so wala dina it'll take fan some manola and in taxpayer my blue do ko what the kodolta e bo kala ñaari dum place old e baro nene le ko mo fala baro du yema jang ko samu ko rana rek fa ni hakilo be defana le fana be la mo la mo sifal ye ñu na mol la men yalon ko magne to nene me respect nene me buña just because they can have an opportunity with you yes amana yeke famba ma janko ke wolto pointi hani dennu ni aje ka fakar mama kulwol why because grandmothers love their grandchildren more and they hardly say no to them because for hani amanke ko ke tinyal bari ni amo ka mama kulwo pura ya fo hani aka koleal ila wulula le ko fo bar fo ya indicate le ko la wulula me kam ye kam bari ka jelo ko tela fra ndungo efficient so mana a fintra oda akana ke molie e ka fanyadi akana moltor so wala ka na parents they are a little harsh on their children because they want them to be better but nana in terms of grandparents they give a little more leeway so la neka fuma makulo the same thing Barrow wants people around him many along go about praise you know ya waja you know saying all kinds of things so at the fair those are the people that love him akava amad sana membulo kunta janne ni wal ka ko state money you cannot use it kodo ndi jan no man taw kala fenka men ka fa no ate wala muta jawod so I'll be bayabala now they put him in a problem so nyina mo la ko tata na ta damu be mo nyinet like they just after their wallets and how to maintain the life that they're living but getting back into it young people what you're witnessing is an unraveling of the lies that they use to keep themselves. You know, when people tell lies for a long time, they start believing those lies. They convince themselves that the lies are the truth because they have said it so many times now, it is the reality, it is the truth to them. Anything else is poison. They have already poisoned their own minds. They're trying to poison your mind with the narrative that they weave. And when you go against that narrative, they start saying somebody is poisoning their mind. That is why they go after people. These are opposition-sponsored people. April 10th and 11th, what did they say? Opposition elements. Or when people protest during Germany, they say it's foreign agents, the EU, and all the other people. He will point to other people because he believed the lies he told himself that he's the best thing to happen to Gambia. The same thing is the same tactic. They lie so much that it becomes the truth for them. So when young people realize, this is not what we want, they make up their own mind by observing the things that are happening, and they speak up. They say somebody is influencing them. They did the same thing with 3 years Jordan. They're doing the same thing with Gala. Coach Nyoleke sponsor, Jukan sponsor, there's some agents in the diaspora will be a sponsor. Like, the young people cannot make their own mind. Why? Because they've been selling these lies so much, they believe that these are the truths, and the young people should believe the same thing they believe. If they don't believe that somebody else is poisoning their mind, when in fact they're the ones who poison their own mind, and now they want those people to consume the same poison. It's lies upon lies. I saw somebody post on Facebook, if you want to understand the Gambian of today, go back to the Gambian of 1965. And that's the fact. Just like Bob Marley put it simply, if you don't know where you come from, you're not going to know where you're going. So where did we come from? That's where all these things began. It's the same narrative they keep weaving and weaving and weaving. Why? Because they want to stay in power. Power gives them access, and that access is what they're afraid of losing. So whenever they lash out, that's it. While they're in power, they have that access. They build their own cabals around them, their own cronies, get into positions of influence. And when you try to dislodge that, they start accusing you of tribalism. Yaya Jammeh did the same thing. Yaya Jammeh is not out for the interests of, just jollers. He's out for his own interests. But because he can find a group that he can manipulate for sympathy, he goes that route. I used to work with somebody, he's from Kamfenda. Nobody hates Yaya Jammeh more than that guy, and they're from the same ethnic group. Why? Because Yaya Jammeh took all their farmlands. Either he buys it off at cheap price, claims that it belongs to the Jammeh family, or just confiscates it. And they have nowhere to turn to. Fonyi was not opposed completely, not because everybody accepted what Yaya Jammeh was doing, but because you live in a community where he says, I am one of you, so support me. And then a lot of people bought that, and if you decide to go against that, you open yourself up to attacks, you open yourself up to vilification, to being ostracized, to, even violence in a community where a majority are supporting one party and one person, and you seem to be otherwise. Which is why, when Yaya Jammeh fell, we saw that there was actually people in Fonyi who didn't support him. That's how they use positions and influence. So the young people, the Gen Z, I see them print t-shirts, Gen Z against corruption. This is your time. But you need to know where we came from, how we got here, before you can effectively fight this monster. They have woven lies so much that they make you look elsewhere. Like, look at your alternative. They are not better than us. But if you focus on one thing and one thing only, nothing else, absolutely nothing else, you focus on one thing, you'll find your answers. The Gambia is a debt-ridden country. You're going to pay the debt that you owe. The country owes out of your taxes. Your children are going to pay, and their children are going to pay, and there'll still be debt. Money that you use for debt servicing and paying for debt is not going to be invested in anything else, like building schools or providing resources for teachers and students to learn better, in terms of technology and advancing the country. It's not going to be introduced in agriculture for them to, create food self-sufficiency in that country. That money will be used to service debt because nobody wants a bad credit rating. So how much do we spend on that debt servicing? Do you pay your taxes to people in opposition, or do you pay it to the government? That's the question. Once you answer that question, you will know where your focus 100% needs to be. I've always said it. There is a strategy to exercising your power. And that strategy is holding the people in power accountable by whatever means you can. Show them that we have the power. If you don't do what we want, we will boot you out. Either in the streets or at the polls. We are determined to go anywhere to make sure you do right by us or you get out. Once you saw that, when Barrow came, the hopes were high for all those changes. Security sector reform, constitutional reform, public service reform. All of these things was what we said was wrong with the Yaya Jammeh. Initially, they started okay. Why? Because all these commissions were set up. You set up a commission, you find out this is wrong, that is wrong, they did this wrong. Okay, how did they do it? Jana Commission came up with recommendations. This is how Yaya Jammeh used to steal from the public. So let's enact new laws around public finance to make sure no president can get away with what Yaya Jammeh got away with. Those laws need to be implemented. TRRC, how did Yahya Jammeh abuse Gambians? All those revelations told us this is what Yahya Jammeh did and that's what he did. This is who he used, that's who he used. TRRC made recommendations. Those recommendations need to be put into law to make sure no president in the future can abuse Gambians using that. We learn from our mistakes, essentially. Constitution. Yahya Jammeh used the National Assembly and the Constitution to give legal cover to all his abuses in the country. How do we amend that? New Constitution, CRC brought a draft. All these are changes. That's how we learn from history. Everybody who tells you a narrative about history, unless it's documented at the time it was happening, even when it's documented, there are some biases that seep into it. So you take from my side, you take from the person who is opposite my side, you decide where the truth lies or where the middle ground is or which one is more balanced, and you go with that. Make your own mind. That is why even in court you have the defense and the prosecution. The defense has a reason why they did what they did, and the prosecution is saying, no, this violated law. So now they go into intent or whatever, and then the jury makes a decision. You are the jury in this case. But don't rely on history that is told to you from people who have a stake in it. Fatma Jawumpasise is not going to tell you anything that is truthful about government because her whole entire existence is based on that. PPPC was in the middle of it, in the thick of it. When Yahya Jammeh did the coup, she switched sides, pretended as if Yahya Jammeh was the best thing that have ever happened to the Gambia, when in fact Yahya Jammeh told us Fatma Jawumpasise used to look down on him, refused to give him lifts when they wanted to go from State House to depot in Bakau. Used to call him Boy Kanilai. That's why he used that, just to humiliate her, to show that I have power now and I know that's what you crave. I'm going to make you crawl on your all fours to beg me. She did. She has no qualification. Can you imagine somebody who was one time Speaker of the National Assembly of the Gambia, the third person in line to the presidency, talking like this? Speaker of a house in which UDP was members, Kemes and Jammeh's time and all that, and then having this kind of view about those people. Even if those are your views, keep them inside. Why are you sharing that with people on audios? Not only that you are now an ambassador representing Gambia, you sit there with the Gambian flag behind your back. But we have come to a place where people who support anything other than what the sitting president wants are no longer Gambians. That is why they label everybody in that group as UDP. Whether you are UDP or not, if you say something against the government, they say you are UDP affiliate. Speaking truth to power now is equivalent to you. So when they say UDP, there is so many people in that umbrella. Some people don't even realize it. Some people use it as a convenient cover to be tribalistic or to be, bigoted. Some people use it as a shield to protect their interests, so they go after everybody who they feel like is going to attack us. They say they're UDP, they're UDP sympathizers, they're UDP, they just pretend. UDP has come to be synonymous with that. So what did you know about the history of the Gambia up to this point? Because if you are Gen Z, you were born during the time of Yahya Jammeh. So that means you know nothing about Jawara's time unless it was narrated to you. You know very little about Jammeh's time, because if you were born in Jammeh's time, he was 22 years in power. Nobody takes interest in politics or know what is going on really until your teenage years. So when Jammeh was about to leave, that was when you became a teenager. And then we added these 8 years into it. So what do you know about the history of the country for you to make up your mind? You just saw a snippet of that with what Gala did. With this corruption scandal, they see with evidence these people are abusing us. They don't need a third party, but they're trying to weave it to make it look like you guys are not smart enough to decipher these things for yourself. Somebody has to be behind you to help you. So essentially, they think young people are dumb. You have more access to information than they ever did. With the internet, you can research anything. You see what is happening in other countries, what young people are doing in other countries. And if that motivates you to want more from your people in power, their lies that they've told themselves, Barrow is good for us, they're building roads for us, they're doing this and that and that. That to them is enough. So they weave this whole plot, and then you have imams. One kept coming out the other day saying, oh, Mabuka Mansa opposed. They always say that. People can have knowledge. You go and learn the Quran cover to cover, memorize it and all that, but there's also wisdom. If you don't have wisdom, you cannot effectively communicate with people or tell them what the problem is that they need to address. You will just spew things that you read. It's kind of like you cram stuff and then you just put it out. But you don't really have that wisdom. If they say scholars are the inheritors of the prophets, what were the jobs of the prophets? We give one example. The Pharaoh was a tyrant. Moses was sent to him to stop him. Even the prophet that we follow, when he came in Mecca, there were people who were in power. He stood up to them. Ibrahim was standing up to the status quo. So that was their responsibility. The people who are ruling over other people, who are their administrators, need to be just. They don't need to persecute people or oppress them. But if they say, the person who comes to power, Yalla Mokofa, leave him alone. Okay. They do something wrong, and then you have the imams on the other side. You cannot talk against the president because God put him there. So now what? We just put them there and just let them be. Let them do whatever they want until God takes their life away from them. It doesn't make any sense. So if you're not going to preach against the corruption and the decadence in the country, let people do what they want to do. But you cannot stand there men ba fokan ye bonko lual long ya lom bonko nyata trama nyaadi le ka fo mol yonko nyingi ni men ka men ke silode nyinam silode e ko mol kana fana fo bawo ala le akiji fo ala jitana ya semana alon di siran ko mol yonka la fele nyinam la mansa fatala wulta dara bonko kan na le ke president ben ne kala la nit ñi na ay waka na ka si mol ye plaso dia la anyanta men ke la mak mol ya hakilo bla ko e mam fo mak e ka mol yonka man nyina woga bawo ala la sindi o ka mol jutunde dino fon la So April 10th and 11 is what they did. They said those students were instigated to do what they did. You see, Ajam just mowed them down because he cannot take responsibility. The same thing with 3 years Jotna. These people are determined to see what they are planning now is what is going to bring unrest in the country. People are protesting against corruption. What are they saying? NPP youths are planning themselves. When they protest, we'll protest. What do you think is going to happen? If you want to protest, go and protest. Nobody is stopping you. But you don't wait until people plan their protest and then you say you're going to counter protest. There'll be violence. And who instigated it? Them. Just so they can have more excuse to say we're not going to allow this to happen in the country. That's their strategy. You protest, we're going to send our youths to protest. They will confront you and then you will react and then the police will clamp down on you and start maybe firing and killing people. You see why there's no security sector reform. Everything the NIA used to do, everything the soldiers used to do on the Jame that he used to torture and kill people is the same powers they combine together, give it to the paras and say, oh, the army is now out of politics. Good for them. The NIA is no longer, detaining people and stuff. Good for them. But the police are doing exactly the same. Somebody got arrested by the NIA, end up in Banjul, and then you go find them dead in Tanje. People got arrested in Banjul, jurisdictional problem. Why are you moving them all the way to Brufut? It's the same tactics. So when they tell you there's security sector reform, they're just lying to you. So all these lies that they are selling, now they've convinced themselves that the kids, they don't have a mind of their own. Somebody has to be influenced. That should be an insult to you. So here is how we got here. Like I said, PPP, you hardly know much about it. I don't either, because I'm young. Don't be fooled by this. But I went to primary school under Jawara's government. When you come to school in the morning, you used to get warm milk and cookies or biscuits in the morning. And then you get lunch at school. You know how much you pay? 10 bududs by the time I left. School bus, you can ride it from Brikama to Banjul. All you had to pay was 25 bududs. The dollar to the dalasi was like $5 or $6 in 1994. Now compare it. Even the pound sterling. That's not to say the system was perfect. No human is perfect. Like I said, systems are built to serve the people. And then you'll see lapses and loopholes. Even in the US, democracy, they keep talking about it. We are the beacon of democracy. Now it is being challenged on all fronts. It is put under a stress test because anything can be abused. With Trump, they're witnessing that, okay, they can challenge anything and they're going for anything that they can challenge, defying the courts and all that, leading to a constitutional crisis. So nobody's going to say Jawara is perfect. But in comparison to the current and the past administration after the Jawara, you can tell that that was a better path for the Gambia than we are currently facing. But they will not tell you that. All you hear now, because of the narratives you hear from the grown-ups, is Jawara was corrupt, Jawara was corrupt, Jawara was corrupt. But they're not going to tell you any details about that, because that's the lies they will tell just to stay in the favors of Yahya Jammeh. But if you step back and look, Yahya Jammeh said Jawara was corrupt, that's why he did a coup d'etat. Yahya Jammeh ended up being 10 times more corrupt than Jawara ever was. You've seen the number of properties they listed that Yahya Jammeh has, landed properties alone. When Jawara left power, he has his home in Fajara and the garden in Abuko, and maybe his family compound in Barajali. That's it. Even his home in the UK that he bought, he was still paying for it when he was in exile. He almost got evicted from his home. Does that sound like a corrupt person to you? Not saying there was no corruption in PPP or in the PPP government. There was. As always, just as we are witnessing now, the president gets involved to a certain extent, but to a large extent is the so-called technocrats. With their procurement and all that nonsense, he set up so many things that were knocked off. Rural Development Bank, Agricultural Development Bank, Gambia Cooperative Union, Gambia Public Transport Corporation, National Trading Corporation, all of this were set up under the Jawara government. Institution building was what he focused on to start with. Like I said, it's not perfect. There were loopholes that we needed to learn from and improve upon. When Jammeh came, we had that opportunity with the 1997 Constitution. But what did he do to entrench himself in power? He pushed away the people's desire. In terms of what was obtained, there was a Constitutional Review Commission before this current one. After the military took over power, they banned the Constitution of the Gambia, and then when they were ready to contest elections in 1996, they did a Constitutional Review Commission for people to, give their opinion on what kind of laws they want in the country. That was done. But when it was about to be passed, they changed it into what suit Yahya Jammeh's needs and passed that constitution. That's why we have the 1997 constitution we don't desire. Exactly, Barrow is doing the same thing. CRC consulted all over the country and in the diaspora and showed people, this is the constitution that the Gambian people want. They kicked it out. Now they're still negotiating about the constitution Barrow wants. But in that process, they're trying to tell you, UDP are the one who doesn't want a new constitution. There's nothing more disrespectful than for the people of the Gambia to take their time away from whatever they are doing, travel to cities across in the diaspora just so they can have a face-to-face with the CRC, take their time to write submissions to the CRC. This is what we think the law should be, because we're speaking from experience. For example, I made a submission. I wrote to the CRC. I made a submission in their first issue document saying that they need to include hate speech as an offense in the Gambia. Not insults, because insults are subjective. But if you say something on a platform that is a public platform, for example, on national radio, national TV, and you direct it to a certain group of people, which is what we call tribalism, that should be outlawed in the country. Nobody should be allowed to do that. People can have their individual biases and bigotry and all that. Nobody can control that. But if you go on a public platform and say stuff that is offensive to a whole group of people, that needs to be considered hate crime and it should be punishable under law. We made all those submissions because we saw what happened on the Jammeh, so just so we can rectify those mistakes. But he took his own path. Barrow is doing the same thing. And they talk about this tribalism, which is the notion they painted in your head, like UDP is a tribalist party, they are all for tribalism, they don't care for this country. The track record is there for you to go and see. We can't keep pointing to these things. You need to do some kind of research yourself. The way we are today is as a result of where we've been before. During the colonial days in the, let's say, the decade or 20 years or so leading to independence, what obtained in the Gambia started to shape what would happen after we got our independence. Let's take Farmer Jahumba for example, because she brought herself into this limelight. In our tradition in the Gambia, whether you are Mandinka, Fula, Jola, Wolof, it doesn't matter. People used to say, Jangi Tubab or Tubab Karong is learning about a foreign culture, learning about Kafiria. They don't send their kids to school. We have Mohammedan school for that reason in Banjul, mostly because parents were convinced that if they send their kids to the colonial government never set up public schools. That was done by the missionaries. Wherever they go, the missionaries follow them and they start bringing education into the country. So missionaries built schools. Methodist Boys High School, which became Gambia High School. All these schools were mission schools. So parents were reluctant to send their kids to school because it's a new form of education. Instead of going to madrasa or dara, which is what they're used to, now they're sending them to a school where they're going to learn a foreign language instructed by foreign people who have a different religion. They were convinced that their kids were going to, change their religion into something else. So they were reluctant of sending their kids to school. The people who had access to education then and were educated mostly, it was the Akus. Banjul was predominantly Wolof, yes. There was a sizable population of the Aku in Banjul as well, and they were more close to power in the sense that they were, literate or educated. They were not reluctant to go to school, so they were able to read and write, which is what the colonial government needed. So they had positions in government. And then when the space opened up, because the British said they're democratic, for politics, most of these parties that were formed to get seats in parliament, because we had a parliamentary democracy, were headed by Akus or Christians. P.S. Njai, there was no more Wolof than him, but he was a Christian. J.C. Fight, Reverend. And you have, who else? E.F. Small, let's say he was a politician too, but he was also Christian. So these were the people who were basically, let's say, the movers and shakers in politics. And then along came I am Gaba Jahumpa. I'm not saying his intent was to cause division or whatever, but he wanted to appeal to the population of Banjul in terms of his politics. He named his party Gambia Muslim Congress. Obviously, the Muslims are going to give that more consideration than, any other party that was headed by a non-Muslim. If you want to say there's sectarian politics in the Gambia, that was the first one of it. He deserves respect because he served our country. He was a minister at one point, and they were, working with Jawara. When we got independence, they put all those politics aside. No politician is perfect, yes. But now that he's late, we can look back and say, thank you for the service you did to the country. But these things need to be said. So when people narrate that history, they're not going to say it that way. But it's something we need to know. So when all that was happening, you know what the British policy was? If you're not a yard owner, you cannot vote. Even the people who lived in Banjul, you have to have a compound, like basically a homeowner, before you can vote. Those were the only people who had a say in the affairs of the country. The rest of the country, if you're in Banjul, maybe, okay, I know somebody who has a yard, and then basically we form a cabilo around that person and then tell them what our needs are, and they can vote along those lines. Not saying that's what happened, but at least they can have representation from people within their own community. So those were the people who had the franchise. The rest of the country, nothing. You were just British subjects. So starting from, that's why we have the term Combo Tuba Banco, because it was Bathos and Combo St. Mary's. That was the colony area. So when we say Combo Tuba Banco versus Combo Santo, so starting from Combo Santo all the way to Bolonkono, all the way down to Bara, coming on the North Bank, they had no franchise, no rights, no powers, nothing, no voice. That's why a lot of people will tell you E.F. Small is the father of Gambia's independence or Gambia's political movement. Why? Because he advocated for no taxation without representation, because he saw the conditions in upcountry Gambia where the British were neglecting everything but taking taxes from the people. So that was the situation in the country. When Jawara came to power, or when he became the leader of the PPP, he was in his 30s. Jawara born in 1924, PPP formed in 1959, and he became its leader. What was that, 35 years old? I'm telling you this just so you can see where we got to here. Just in brief, very briefly, there's a lot more that we cannot touch all of it, all of which we cannot touch on. So that was the party, PPP. When they first formed, they named themselves, because they know they have no voice, they are no representation, but the agents in Banjul, the political parties, try to seek their influence as well, just so they can support them and mobilize people for them, for their campaigns. But their campaigns only stop in the Combo St. Mary's area and Bathos, that's it. The rest of the country, they were not advocating for it. The first to do that was the PPP, Protectorate People's Party, because they brought all their kafos together. Nyomi Kafo is here, Bolonkono Kafo is there, Kombo Kafo is here. They brought them all together and they formed the Protectorate People's Party, or Protectorate People's Society first. And what was their role? To advocate for the inclusion of the protectorate people in the affairs of the country. That is everybody in the country, 99% of the country, let's say. We want them to be enfranchised so that they can have a voice and a say in the affairs of the country. So it was Protectorate People's Society. And then as they progressed and they united their populations from all different regions, you're all from the Protectorate. It doesn't matter if you're from the North Bank or from the Central River or Upper River or Combo. You're all from the Protectorate. You all face the same problem, which is you have no voice. Let's come together and advocate for all of our people. That's how the PPP changed from a Protectorate People's Society to a Protectorate People's Party. And they started going up country, saying that they're trying to fight the British so that the people can have a say in who gets to be their governors, who gets to rule, or who gets to lead the country. So if you have been disenfranchised all these years, and then suddenly a group of people came and said, we want to advocate for you, they are the people you're going to embrace. That's how the PPP was embraced. And it was not just, rural Mandinkas. Hassan Musa Kamara was key there. In fact, when Sirif no longer became vice president, he was made vice president. The Baldes, Matthew Yaya Baldes' parents, Michael Balde, those guys, they were all part of it. The Fanas from up country. But because majority of people in those regions and the people who organized themselves politically during that time were from the Mandinka tribe, they labeled it a Mandinka, party. So they fought using democratic means until the franchise was extended to the rest of the country. Seeing the political power that they have now and needing to extend that and maintain it, they continued their campaign to get seats in government and go for the prime ministerial position. But because of that massive upset to the status quo, they start labeling them. But just like every migrant, the people who came from the protectorate into the, to Banco or into the, colony area, they experienced their own form of discrimination based on the jobs that they were seeking because farming was not doing it for them anymore. So based on that discrimination, they also have a perception of people who are living on the coast. So there was this acrimony between people, but because one group has a concentration of one particular tribe heavily, which is the Mandinka, and then you come to the colony area, has a concentration of another tribe heavily, which is mostly the Wolof and the Aku. There's these two dynamics in Gambian politics. And mind you, within all this time also, there was no education in the provinces except for Armitage, which was mainly designed for the sons of chiefs, for them to go to school. So they were deprived of their voting rights, they were deprived of their voice, they were deprived of education. Very few handful of people. And when they were going to school, up to a certain point, they have to come to Banjul to continue their education. Jawara was one of those people. So with that fighting, they got independence. Obviously, the people in the provinces were the people who carried Jawara to State House. But because of his progressive thinking, he knows this is now beyond the protectorate. So instead of calling ourselves Protectorate People's Party, this is the People's Progressive Party. It's going to include the whole country. You see how he coordinated people from being societies of, Nyomi Society, Kombo, Kambenkafo, Bolonkono Society, or whatever. Those are not the names, I'm just saying. He united them into forming the Protectorate people just to see one interest, which is the interest of the Protectorate people, which was priority number one. Why? Because they were all disenfranchised. Let's come together and see the protectorate. It doesn't matter if you're from Nyomi or Kombo or whatever. Let's bring everybody together. That was his first union. He brought everybody together from the protectorate. When they campaigned and won what they were seeking, which is the franchise for the protectorate, and the independence was won, they changed. Now we have a bigger task, which is the country, the Gambia. Instead of being just protectorate people, yes, we did this. We, fought and got this democratic win. Now let's bring the whole country on board. We are the People's Progressive Party. So guess what? With no education in the provinces, when you win the government back from the British, how are you going to staff the government? When the government is operated Not in the traditional sense of how we're used to having kings and sefolo and all that, but it requires education and technical knowledge of government policies. How are you going to staff your government? Obviously, you will rely on the same people that are in the colony area, so which means they became heavily more involved in government than the people from the provinces. But in their mind, they would not see that. We fought for Jawara. Until Jawara Bambo, we made him president and all that. Now he's hiring people who used to look down on us, used to mock us. Even Jawara himself was subject to that. Read his book. He used to say when he walked the streets from school, he would say, Santongo, say, like, that taunting. So you see that happening. You have to be a bigger person to rise above that and say, this is beyond me, this is beyond my party or my region, this is for the country. I'm going to bring everybody on board, and whoever is capable, I will bring them on board. Even some of the British colonial administrators he maintained, because the last British governor, that's what he told him. Don't be in a hurry to what we call Gambianize your government. You need some technical knowledge. You need some people who will, help you, who know how to operate the government. So retain some of the colonial staff to help you navigate or transition into Gambianization. Even then, some people were against him in the colony area. Oh, we fought for independence to Gambianize the civil service, and he's still maintaining the British. He's a puppet for them. He's this, he's that. But there was a logic behind it. Just the same logic why he didn't just hire people from the provinces and say, you'll be in power. Now that we won the government, you'll be in power just for the sake of being in power, whether you're competent or not. He didn't see that. So because of that, and because of how the politics of that day went, the people who were put in power started saying, if we don't fence ourselves in, when these people get the education they need, they're going to boot us out. That's how the nepotism started. That's how the cronyism started. But in our context, it's going to take on the identity of a tribe. Because if I appoint my cousin to a certain position and then I bring in my brother's, my sister's children also to give them a certain job as a clerk in a certain, they're all going to be from the same ethnic group, from the same background. So predominantly one group starts to surface as the technocrats, as the directors, as the, whatever position, and then the rest of the people fell left out. This is where they started all this tribalism thing. There was this acrimony already there, push and pull. So the people from the provinces, naturally a lot of them got angry. Like, this doesn't make any sense. We fought for Jawara. So that was in 1965 when we had independence. After those first 5 years, or within those first 5 years, there started to be some misunderstanding and some problems between Jawara and some of his key allies or key people in the PPP that included Sirif Diba. When he had that falling out with Sirif Diba, he formed his own party. I think it was after 1971 when the Budut scandal hit. So when Sirif formed his party, one of the things he campaigned on was that we were betrayed as provincial people by the PPP. That's how he was embraced. Because that sentiment was already there. We fought for this government and now they abandon us. Badibu, which is where he's from naturally, except for Sabah Senjal to a certain extent, were mostly on his side with that. Bakau, the same thing, because Bakau, apart from Cape Point, it was considered Kombasanto going up. So this became his strongholds, parts of, LRR, not all of it, not all of Jara and that, but, parts of Kia. This became his stronghold. So that's how the political dynamic stayed until the military came in 1994. Whenever elections are held, we know, it's kind of like we say fixed deposit. Badibu was fixed deposit for the NCP. The mobile force, that's why he got his name. Like in Bakau, he will always win. And he was an NCP candidate, so it doesn't matter who contests against him, it was Dembo by force. We're going to, elect him, because that's how the narrative shaped up in the Gambia. Fast forward to 1994. Yahya Jammeh used to say Mandinkas are self-haters. Why? Because Jawara was a Mandinka and they were the only people fighting against him. Because his main opposition, NCP, was headed by a Mandinka. Dr. Bolandim Bojang, if you guys remember Coalition 2016, he was there. He formed the People's Democratic Party, PDP. He was also Mandinka. Sirif Sise also formed the political party. He was also Mandinka. Sidia was PDRS. He was also Mandinka. So he has that dimensional look at it. Not that those people were doing it because we are tribalists or this tribe or that tribe. No. But he has that mentality. If somebody is from among you, you need to support them. So it doesn't make sense to say that these people are tribalists when they're fighting against their own. They cannot be the same people who are self-haters because they fought against their own, but then now they're tribalists because they're fighting against me. Does that make any sense? It doesn't. You just have to sit and reflect on that. Those people had actual grievances. So when the coup d'etat happened, naturally, everybody, and then they said they banned the PPP, everybody will say, okay, now the soldiers say they're going to return to the barracks, they will return the country to the civilians. The most natural civilian or natural cause for the next civilian president favored Sirif Diba than anybody else. Because he banned the PPP. Anybody who ever, served in that government was banned. That was initially, like when the soldiers returned, before they brought about their decree, I think it was 51 or 61, like anybody who was in the PPP, now the PPP is banned, they're not going to come back, Jawara is not going to come back. So when the soldiers returned to the barracks, naturally, by natural selection, Sirif Diba, who was the most popular politician at that time, would become president if we go to the polls. Because who's there to challenge him? Jawara was his main obstacle. But then it turned out, after the national consultations and everything, Yahya Jammeh wanted to stay in power, which is why he had a falling out with Sana Sabali. November 11 is when it started because they knew they wanted to stay in power. But, all that aside, Yahya Jammeh wanted to stay in power, and to boost his own chances, he had to ban the PPP. And the Gambia was a parliamentary system. Remember that. The Gambia was in a party. It's history lesson. Gen Z needs to know this so that they can better empower themselves and forget all these lies that they're telling people. UDP is not perfect, it's not going to be perfect. Nobody who is going to contest election is going to be perfect. They're trying to tell you the alternative to Barrow has to be perfect. Doesn't make any sense. They will have their flaws, but just like we learned from Jawara time, when Yahya Jammeh came, we needed to change the constitution so that corruption would be minimized. He manipulated the same system and continued the corruption and made it even worse. When the TRRC came, the Jana Commission came, the constitutional review, they saw all the problems in the Jammeh administration because of that inquiry, and now they made recommendations. Let's form a new constitution. This is how you improve the system. So Yahya Jammeh banned all those political parties just to boost his own chances at becoming president and perpetuating himself in power. You know how Lawyer Dabo was first introduced? People in the provinces, us young people, used to say, oh, Koyo Pati Kudol Law, Sirif Dibala lawyer, Wala Banyat. That's how Lawyer Dabo was known, Sirif Dibala lawyer. So naturally, everybody who was for Sirif Dibala is going to gravitate towards it. But not only that, this was formed, UDP was formed by the PPP, by the what is it called again? Asamusa's party. I forgot the name. Asamusaka, GPP, Gambia People's Party. So we had the GPP, the PPP, the NCP, because they have the political base, they had the support and everything, and they were just waiting for the transition to be over so they can jump back into it, and then Yahya Jammeh banned all of them. So they had to act quickly and say, let's form a new party. And they formed the UDP. Who are we going to allow to lead? I remember the first UDP rally in SL. I was a teenager and I attended, and Wajwara was speaking. He said at the time he was in jail. And when the announcement came that the PPP is banned, the NCPP is banned, the NCP is banned, the GPP is banned, he sat in his cell and cried and said, the Gambia is doomed. We don't have anybody else. That was his narration ordinarily. Like, he said, when I heard that, I was in tears. I knew we had no, that's what Wajwara said. Which is why when people say, oh, this person defected, that person defected, I say, just focus. If people like Wajwara who were in despair at the time, but when they heard Lawyer Dabo would lead the UDP and he accepted the invitation to lead the party, he was relieved. And when they went around the country, that's how people knew him. But before that, it was the 1981 coup. You see how they use these tactics, these stupid tactics, is the same they're using against SFR. Oh, he represented Charles Taylor, he represented the Gaddafis, because those people don't know how law operates. Even in Yom Al-Qiyam, we will stand in front of Allah to defend ourselves. Why did you do what you were told not to do? The only difference is you don't have a lawyer because you cannot lie. That day lying will be impossible. Your limbs will have to testify against you as, what you made them do. So even if somebody obviously look like they committed a crime, they need representation to defend their position. Why did you do this? They can plead sanity or whatever. So all those things are there. So what, because somebody represent, imagine if, you know, they say, oh, somebody accused Sirif Diba of being involved in the Kukoy 1981 coup d'etat, because Kukoy was a candidate for the NCP in I can't remember which election it was, but for the National Assembly, and he lost in Fonyi. So imagine if they say, oh, Sirif would have been in jail from 1981. That would have been the end of his political career. But through representation, it was revealed that in fact he had no part in it. Everybody deserves that. Even if it looks obvious, you need to corroborate these accusations. So people use those excuses, oh, he was here defending the coup of 1981. He was not defending the coup, he was defending people who were accused of being involved in the coup. They deserve their rights too. Even if FJC today does something, like, you know, if he gets fired, which he should, and recalled back to the Gambia and gets sued, she should have a lawyer to represent her. That's how democracy was. It might seem inconvenient. So that's when Latta became popular in Gambia's political scene. As soon as he mounted that, his popularity was already there. Jaliba already sang about him, and he was popular from that 1990. Information was not so widespread back then, but everybody knew him. So now Jammeh saw a new threat. How am I going to go after this threat? He tried everything possible. The final card he pulled out was his tribalism card. Put it on the head of UDP. Because if Sirif Diba's supporters, Jawara's supporters, Asan Musa Kamara's supporters all decide we're now going to support the UDP, that means all of Badibu, which was Sirif's stronghold, all of Kiang, which was his stronghold, and Bakau will still be UDP. Jawara's strongholds, which is mostly, you know, parts of LRR, like in Jara, and going up to, you know, CRR, parts of it, they will also be within the UDP. So now how are you going to create that narrative? Which is why, after the 1996 elections, before the 2001 election, he thought the best way to dismantle the UDP is to make, say, NCP, you are no longer banned. PPP, you're no longer banned. GPP, you are no longer banned. You can all just join the fray now. Thinking that when those people form their parties, UDP would disintegrate and now all the votes would be, but that didn't happen. So last card arrest, what was it? Tribalism. These people, you know, it's like Mandinkas, when they were here, that's how it started. All of the people who are accusing UDP of that tribalism that they put in your head, ask them to give you examples. The one example they will cite is, oh, they go to their rallies and say, Mandinka Fasa. Absolute 100% complete lie. That was said one time, and it was said in 2016 at the funeral of Solo Kroma that Yahya Jammeh killed. Why did he kill him? Before that, Yahya Jammeh used to stand on a political platform, insulting UDP and all that, and then he ended up starting to now insult the Mandinkas. Amadou Kora was the one who made that statement. He said, he came after us for our politics. He came after us for the leaders in the politics. Now he has bundled us all together and saying because we are Mandinkas, he is going to fight us, deport us to Mali, kill us if he has to, bury us 6 feet deep. If you didn't do it because of politics, you didn't do it because of, you know, your fellow countrymen, now do it for your tribe because you are not safe anymore as long as you're a Mandinka. That's why he was saying Mandinka Yafasa. Is that justified or not justified? That was not to say if you are Mandinka, you should support UDP. No. Let's kick Yahya Jammeh out because he's coming after you. He's the one who said it. That's the only example. But then, even if that is true, that's their campaign. A party that's been in existence since 1996. You didn't hear them utter that word once until 2016, but all of a sudden, because of that, they're a tribalist party. Like, does that make any sense? Do some research on the Gambia's political evolution for you to understand where we are. The people who feed off of government, who tell you we never oppose the government, whatever they do is okay, we're, you know, just going to be with them. Those same people trying to steal your mind, telling you lies, lies that they themselves have now believed, convinced themselves that this is the truth, they are blinded by it, anything else is, you know, is poison to you. They want you to drink the same poison they drank. And if you decide that I'm not going to drink this, I'm going to make up my own mind, say, nope, this is not possible. These kids are not smart enough to, you know, see things from a different perspective. Somebody has to be pushing them. And natural enemy, UDP, let's go after them. They think all these activists, whether they say it out loud or not, they think all these activists that are talking against the Barrow government are UDP. That's their notion. So I'm not saying go support the UDP or vote for them, but make up your own mind. You're not going to get a perfect candidate to come, but get a candidate who is willing to come and make reforms. Like I said, Jammeh used to abuse Gambians in all aspects. When he first came, because he said there was corruption, he has to prove it. He formed the Algali Commission. He seized properties of PPP ministers and, directors from the PPP administration. His case was slightly different. He gave some of them to, soldiers to use as bases, or the NIA to use as torture chambers. But that was still state institutions. Instead of renting, he was using people's homes, which is still wrong, but he didn't personalize it. What's my point? FJC was there saying Jammeh was better than anything that has ever happened to the Gambia. She was supporting all that. Nothing was wrong there. And whenever they are at rallies, he will be the one, because people were afraid of Jammeh. The only people who stood up to him were UDP. Whatever he gives them, they give it back. And they start labeling them as, troublemakers. Because during that time, from 2001, I would say, 1996, that period was tense, soldiers with their guns campaigning. So people were like, okay, we got to be careful. But now that it's politics season, Jammeh also had to be careful because he said it's back to democracy. So democracy requires people participating in politics. After the 1996 elections, there was a little more restrictions. By 2001, people realized that this man will do anything to stay in power, including children being killed in the streets in broad daylight. He would do that to stay in power. So some people started coiling back, whoa, who are we dealing with here? I'm not ready to die just yet. So naturally, the people who are already in the game had to keep playing, which was UDP, PDOIS. I think those were mainly the main players, and some of the activists. So a lot of them exiled themselves, journalists. So after that 2000 incident, the 2000 election was, even more volatile. A lot of violence happened during that time as well too. If you don't know, we can get into that at some point. So from that, a lot of people decided this is not worth it. We're stepping back from politics. A lot of people traveled, a lot of people sought exile and went and they became the activists because they cannot turn their back on the country. During that time, before the 2006 election also, was that when they killed Dede Haidara? Shot him dead. So all of that was happening during the Jammeh administration. So naturally, the UDP cannot be a conventional or traditional political party. They have to include some form of activism in their activities as well. Even though we are a registered political party, which means we have the backing of the law, we're going to use that to be activists, an activist political party. True, when the change happened, some of that need to be shed, but it was required at that time. That is how they got labeled as troublemakers. Jammeh will be on his thing and calling people names, and then people will be on the streets calling him Tony Dawa during the campaign. So people had this fear, oh, if you attack this person, you know what he's going to do? He's going to kill people, he's going to jail people, he's going to torture people, he's going to do this. Well, we're not afraid of that. Single Nyazi, Alman Nemaninka Farkala, I asked him. That man was tortured so much. And part of the reason was because, oh, you're a Jola, why you're supporting the Mandinkas? So they beat him one because he was UDP and beat number two. You can't find the Busa for Labija. There's one Buso for the Mandinkas and one for opposition. And he had the third one because he was considered a traitor to his group. So when you're faced with all that, what do? You evolve, you adapt. But while that is happening, like they trigger you and then you react and they start labeling you. But none of it is true. All they want to do is maintain power. But even before he got to the height of his nonsense and, decided that, okay, I'm going to take the gloves off and do everything I need to do, Jammeh actually stopped this same Fatmata Jahumba Sise at a political rally when she took the microphone and was going to go after Lawyer Dab. That alone should have, killed that person, morally speaking. But she stayed at it. Because there's this, if they feed you the same poison, you're going to face the same thing. They create pictures and labels and say this is what these people are, and because there's no resources to reference, or when you reference it, they start accusing you of stuff that is not true, because our narrative is here, it needs to stand. Don't change it. If you change it, you're a tribalist. If you change it, you hate this person or that person. So they steal your mind. The same poison they drank, they make you drink from the same poison, and now you can't really decide what to do for your country. The only alternative to changing a government is either through widespread, massive street protests and make the government resign, or go to the polls. That is at least my subscription. The other alternative is a coup. It's not too bad in Burkina Faso right now, is it? But I won't advocate for that, because when they come, the first thing they do is suspend rights. So if that is your option, either being ready to bleed in the streets, because they will respond with force. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's what they do. So when you're in this game, you need to know that. Or you wait for elections and go vote them out. When you vote out people, you can only pick from the alternatives who present themselves. There's no other choice. Let's say we go to elections today. You can only select from NPP, UDP, PDIS, and whatever party, Sobea, and then SR whatever party is coming. Those are the people you can select from. So you make your choice out of that. Don't wish for an angel, because they're not coming. There is no ballot box for those people. So if you've already made up your mind about a certain group of people, this government has already proven themselves as unworthy. They are corrupt to the core. Adama Barrow elevates people who are corrupt. That shows you that he is not. You see the National Assembly, what they do right now. All this bickering about who needs to be on this committee that they set up. NPP, NRP, who else is there? APRC, they are all considered NPP. All of them. So if you overwhelm and say, oh, we're selecting one from this party, that party, that's a technicality, but essentially you have all three from NPP and then one or two people from the opposition. So we have a lot to deal with. Set those blinders that they try to feed to you in terms of the poison. When you make change, the natural order of things is when change happens, there will be a probing into Barrow administration and their term in office, what they did wrong, what they stole, what they looted, what they misappropriated. There will be that commission. And when that commission is concluded, there will be recommendations. Those recommendations are further shields that we use to say this thing will not happen in this country again. That becomes law. The next government will find other loopholes to use. Maybe, do a little more corruption here and, abuse rights here or there. That will happen. But when they happen instantly, we also rise up and say this is not going to happen until we force change. And when that change happens, there'll be another probing, and then that also gets fixed. That's how you move the country forward. But most essentially, somebody who knows that my term here is limited, after 10 years I'm going to go, they're going to behave a little better. And we're not going to get this with this president. They manipulated the people's desire through the CRC, throughout the Constitution. And what are they doing now? Trying to bring their own, which is going to be rejected. So they have a shield. Well, we try to bring a constitution and nothing there, so we just go with 1997 Constitution. All the time, using the power of incumbency and their experience to try to suppress citizens' pathway to expressing themselves. That's how they use you, or us. So it's time to make a choice, and the choice is clear. This guy has to go in order for us to get sanity. It got to a point in 2016 when people were saying openly in public, if you don't believe me, go see the Kerfado interview, when Khalifa was saying, Gambians were saying, even if you bring a dog, we're going to vote for it. We don't want to get to that point. You have decent people in the opposition, make your choice and stick with it. The ideal thing will be everybody comes together and then we just kick Barrow out. But at the end of the day, everyone has a different political ideology, and that's just human nature. It's going to persist. But who has the better chance of effecting change? And when that change has taken place, what says you about your rights? We can assure you that we'll be on your side if UDP decides to suppress any rights, or decides they're not going to bring a new constitution, or decides they're going to be involved in corruption or human rights abuses. We will be on the same side on them then. My choice now is an alternative to the government. But when that government comes and they decide to be other, I was on the side of Barrow. But look how he turned out. And here I am today. The same thing will happen. If you decide you're going to support the UDP and we all did together and put them in power, and they decide to act a certain way, I'll be on the same side doing the same thing again against them. I'm telling you more history about what happened and how it changed. So, anyway, today is a bit long. These people start this nonsense on weekends. when we have plenty of time. But we got other stuff to do as well. Farmer Jaumbasise should be recalled. If the person who became number 3 in the country's line of succession as Speaker of the House cannot moderate herself, cannot talk, with objectivity, but label certain aspects of the citizenry that she is supposed to serve the way she did, that person deserves not to be in any public office. And Adama Barrow will do well to recall her. And when she's finally kicked out, the IGP, we know you're not going to do that. We're just saying these things, but we know it's not going to happen. They just do what they want to do. There's 2 sets of laws in the Gambia. If you're NPP, you can get away with whatever. If you are not NPP, just say, like people need to come out and protest and you'll be arrested for inciting violence and put in jail and whisked off to someplace. They are all in it together, all of them. So our only salvation, change the system. And that's from Barrow all the way down. We kick him out, we have our freedom again, our independence to decide where we want the country to go. We shouldn't be tired of starting from scratch again. But we can assure you we need a new constitution, it will happen. TRC recommendations will be implemented. Jana Commission recommendations will be implemented fairly, even if they need to be reviewed again. Security sector reform will take place, civil service reform will take place, and there will be a commission to probe Barrow. Or even if we're just going to go after the audit reports from different periods of the Barrow administration and go after the people. All those things will happen. Wherever you hear coalitions, people are talking about coalitions, yes, they are ideal. But how do we do it? If, for example, I know I'm not going to be able to pull the numbers to win against the incumbent, I can look at a party that like GFF, Gambia for GFA did in the 2021 elections. I care about a new constitution. Does UDP promise to give a new constitution? Yes. Okay, based on that, I can support them. I also care about security sector reform. Can you give me that if you empower? Yes. Then you back the party. If they don't do what they say they were going to do, then they own it. But it seems like, in our strategies of, okay, when we all come together, then, this person will get this position, that person will get that position. To a certain extent, that is selfish. Like, what am I going to get out of it? When it should be about what can we do for the country together. So let's start thinking along those lines. Who has policies that you can get behind and support that person? But if everybody starts coming and, being disruptors, creating their own parties here, and then when elections are over, nobody hears from them again. In essence, it's like you're trying to help the status quo. Or even if we hear from you, you're going to be like Ismail Assise, who came with so much enthusiasm from young people, only for him to flip and join Adama Barrow. So don't let yourselves be fooled by that again. 2026 is around the corner. We're not going to be distracted by anything, even though we can still. It's kind of like a project management. You have your critical path, and then you have your, issues on the side that you can tackle while you're on your critical path. That timeline is not changing, but we can also grab these little distractions here and there and put them in their place. No one is afraid of you, Fatma Jaumbasise. That ranchangness that you do at political platforms, this is a different generation. You say it, we give it back to you. It's that simple. If you think that people are going to shy away from it, that's not happening. Jammeh gave you a shield in the essence that people monitored themselves to a certain extent, what they said and who they say it against. That is why you felt like you were untouchable. You are not. So pack your bags and just leave our diplomatic mission, because you have proven that you cannot do what it takes. But we know that's not going to happen. Barrow is not going to fire you. So mind your business, do your job. Otherwise, when we come here next time, it will be worse than, whatever you think this is. Anyway, Allah Baraka Baka, time has gone. We'll see you again next week, inshallah.